You're disgusting. Stay away from my car. The words cut through the rain like a blade. Elias Reed, 72 years old, sat motionless on the wet pavement as muddy water dripped from his face. The luxury SUV that had just drenched him disappeared into the storm, its driver's laughter echoing behind. Pedestrians stared. Some pulled out phones. Others looked away in shame, but Elias didn't move. He didn't shout. He simply watched the vehicle vanish, his weathered hands trembling, not from cold, but from something far more dangerous, controlled fury. Because this wasn't an accident. This was a test. And the woman who just failed it had no idea she'd just destroyed her own future. If you're watching, please comment your city below. I want to see how far this story reaches. Now let me take you to where it all began. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday afternoon, turning the streets of Montgomery into rivers of gray. Elias Reed sat on the corner of 5th and Market, his back against the cold brick of an abandoned storefront, his clothes worn and patched, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a tattered cap. To anyone passing by, he was invisible, just another casualty of a city that moved too fast to notice its broken pieces. But Elias Reed was not broken. He was hunting. His eyes, sharp despite his age, tracked every face that passed. He watched how people crossed the street to avoid him. He saw the mothers who pulled their children closer. He noted the businessmen who checked their watches and quickened their pace as if poverty might be contagious. And he remembered every single one. This was his 3rd week on the streets. 3 weeks of cold concrete, stale bread, and deliberate humiliation. 3 weeks of testing a city's soul, one interaction at a time. But today, something would break. The black Range Rover appeared first as a distant growl, its engine purring with expensive arrogance. Elias didn't look up immediately. He'd learned to recognize wealth by sound alone. The particular hum of German engineering, the whisper of premium tires on wet asphalt. This one was close. This one was coming fast. Too fast. The puddle beside him was deep, fed by a broken storm drain that the city had ignored for months. Elias saw it coming before it happened. The angle of approach, the speed, the trajectory. He could have moved. Should have moved. But he stayed exactly where he was, his body tensed, waiting for impact. The SUV hit the water at 40 miles per hour. The waves struck him like a physical blow, drenching him head to toe in filthy street water mixed with oil, garbage, and things he didn't want to identify. It soaked through his coat, his shirt, his skin. It filled his shoes and plastered his hair to his skull. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't see through the muddy water streaming down his face, but he could hear. The laughter came first. High, sharp, utterly delighted. Then the window rolled down, and a woman's voice cut through the rain with surgical precision. "Oh my God, did you see that? That was perfect." Elias wiped the mud from his eyes slowly, deliberately. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring at a face that belonged on magazine covers, angular, flawless, framed by honey blonde hair that probably cost more to maintain than most people's monthly rent. Lydia Crow. He knew her name, though she had no idea who he was. She leaned out the window of her Range Rover, her phone extended, recording him with unconcealed glee. "This is going straight to Instagram," she announced to someone in the passenger seat, a thin woman with nervous eyes who laughed on cue but kept glancing away. "Look at him. He looks like a drowned rat." Elias said nothing. He simply looked at her, water dripping from his chin, his expression unreadable. "What?" Lydia's smile sharpened. "You want money? Is that it? You think standing there looking pathetic earns you sympathy?" She reached into her purse, pulled out a dollar bill, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it onto the wet pavement between them. "There, buy yourself some dignity." A crowd had begun to gather, faces in windows, pedestrians stopping under awnings, phones appearing like stars in the gloom. Elias heard their murmurs, felt their stares. Shame was a weapon Lydia wielded expertly, and she knew it. "You're disgusting," she continued, her voice rising for her audience. "This is exactly what's wrong with this city. People like you, just sitting around expecting handouts instead of getting a job. You're an eyesore. You're making everyone uncomfortable." "Ma'am," the voice came from the sidewalk. A young man in a security uniform, his face tight with discomfort. "Maybe you should..." "Should what?" Should pretend he's not a problem? Lydia turned her contempt on him next. I pay taxes in this city. I shouldn't have to look at this on my way home. Elias finally moved. He bent down, picked up the crumpled dollar, and held it out to her without a word. The gesture stopped her mid-sentence. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or the faintest shadow of uncertainty. But it passed quickly, replaced by fresh anger. Keep it, she snapped. You clearly need it more than I do. She glanced at the growing crowd, seemed to realize she'd created enough content, and rolled up her window. The Range Rover pulled away from the curb with a spray of water that soaked two more pedestrians, its license plate disappearing into traffic. Lydia won. The crowd dispersed slowly, uncomfortably, people returning to their routines with relief. Crisis averted. Entertainment over. Life goes on. Elias remained where he was for another 10 minutes, letting the rain wash away the worst of the mud. Then he stood, collected his worn backpack, and walked 6 blocks east to where a black Mercedes waited in an underground parking garage. The driver, a man named Thomas, who'd worked for the Reed family for 30 years, opened the door without comment. He'd seen Elias return from these expeditions before. Home, sir? Home. The Reed estate sat 20 miles outside Montgomery, hidden behind old-growth forest and a gate that didn't advertise its presence. The house itself was modest by billionaire standards, only 12,000 square feet, designed for comfort rather than display. Elias had built it 40 years ago, back when he was still running Reed Industries, back before he'd handed the empire to his son and retreated into a quieter life of observation and testing. Thomas pulled around to the private entrance. Elias climbed out, waved away the umbrella his driver offered, and walked through the rain to his door. Inside, warmth and light waited, along with the truth of who he really was. He showered for 20 minutes, scrubbing away the street until his skin was raw. Then he dressed in soft cotton pants and a cashmere sweater, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and settled into his favorite chair by the window. The rain continued to fall, drumming against glass that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a week. His phone buzzed. A message from Julian, his son. Dinner tomorrow? Haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Elias smiled and typed back. Your place, 7 p.m. I have something to tell you. He did indeed. But first, he needed to understand exactly what his son had gotten himself into. Julian Reed was 42 years old, unmarried, and according to every business magazine in the country, one of the most eligible bachelors alive. He'd inherited Reed Industries at 30, tripled its value by 35, and now controlled a portfolio that touched everything from renewable energy to artificial intelligence. He was brilliant, driven, and desperately lonely, though he'd never admit the last part out loud. The penthouse he called home occupied the top 3 floors of Montgomery's newest tower, a glass and steel monument to modern excess that dominated the skyline. Elias arrived exactly at 7, riding a private elevator that recognized his biometrics and admitted him without question. Julian met him at the door, embracing his father with genuine warmth. You look good. Rested. I've been keeping busy. Elias followed him into the main living space. 30-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than cars. How's the merger going? Brutal. We're hemorrhaging goodwill in the press, even though we're offering better terms than anyone else. Julian poured wine, a burgundy that Elias knew cost 4 figures. But that's not what you want to talk about. No. Elias settled into a chair that probably cost more than his beggar costume's entire wardrobe. I want to talk about Lydia Croce. Julian's hand paused halfway to his mouth. How do you know about Lydia? Because 3 hours ago she drove past me on 5th Street and drenched me with street water while calling me disgusting. Elias watched his son's face carefully. Then she filmed it for social media. The color drained from Julian's cheeks. Dad, tell me you weren't... I was. Elias sipped his bourbon. 3 weeks now. Different locations, different disguises, same truth. I wanted to see how this city treats its invisible people. And this afternoon, your girlfriend taught me exactly who she is when no one important is watching. Julian set down his wine glass with a hand that trembled slightly. She didn't know it was you. Would it have mattered if it was someone else? Of course it would matter. She's not. Julian stopped, his lawyer's brain catching up with his heart. This was a test. Everything is a test, son. The question is whether we're paying attention to the results. Elias leaned forward. How long have you been seeing her? 8 months? Do you love her? The pause was answer enough, but Julian tried anyway. She's exciting, beautiful, connected. She understands my world. That's not what I asked. Julian walked to the window, his silhouette sharp against the city lights. I thought I might. She's different from the others, confident, ambitious, unafraid of who I am. Most women either want my money or run from it. Lydia doesn't care. She doesn't care because she has her own, Elias said quietly. The Crow family made their fortune in real estate speculation and predatory lending. They're worth about $200 million, enough to feel rich, not enough to feel secure, which makes them dangerous. You investigated her? I investigate everyone who gets close to you. Elias didn't apologize for it. It's my job as your father, and what I found concerns me. Lydia Crow has left a trail of broken people behind her, former friends, business partners, household staff. All of them tell the same story. She's charming until you can't offer her something she wants. Then she's cruel. Julian turned back from the window. People say that about me too, about us, ruthless, cold. Maybe she's just good at business. There's a difference between being good at business and enjoying cruelty. Elias stood, crossing to his son. I've watched you build this empire, Julian. Yes, you're tough. Yes, you make hard decisions, but you've never humiliated someone for sport. You've never kicked people when they're down and laughed about it. So what do you want me to do? Break up with her because she had one bad moment? I want you to see her clearly, without the beauty, without the charm, without the performance. Elias gripped his son's shoulder. I want you to ask yourself, is this someone you can trust with your worst days? Is this someone who will treat the people you love with dignity? Is this someone who sees human beings or status symbols? Julian pulled away, pacing. You're asking me to end an 8-month relationship based on one incident. I'm asking you to pay attention to who she is when the cameras aren't rolling. Elias softened his voice. Son, I've loved 3 women in my life. Your mother, God rest her soul, was the first. The other 2 taught me what I should have known from the start. Character reveals itself in how we treat people who can't fight back. Your mother tipped generously and learned the names of every person who served her. She stopped to help strangers. She saw people, all people, as worthy of dignity. That's why I married her. That's why I've never found anyone to replace her. And you think Lydia isn't that person? I know she isn't. I saw it today. Elias finished his bourbon. But I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to test it yourself. Bring her here. Introduce her to me, properly, as your father, not as the homeless man she humiliated. Watch how she responds. Watch what she does when she realizes who I am, and then make your own choice. Julian was quiet for a long time, the city humming below them, rain beginning to fall again against the windows. Finally, he nodded. Friday night. I'll tell her we're having dinner with my father. Good. Elias moved toward the elevator. And Julian? I hope I'm wrong. I hope she surprises me. Because the alternative, watching you build a life with someone who sees kindness as weakness, that would break my heart. The elevator doors closed on his son's troubled face, and Elias descended back into the night, back toward the car that would return him to his hidden mansion, back toward a world where he could be both beggar and king, tester and judge. But first, there was someone else he needed to meet. Clara Miles had been unemployed for 6 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days. Not that she was counting obsessively or anything. The rejection emails had blurred together into a chorus of corporate condolence. We appreciate your interest, pursuing other candidates. Best of luck in your future endeavors. 27 applications. 27 polite dismissals. Her degree in agricultural science, earned with honors and crushing student debt, apparently qualified her for exactly nothing in a city that had paved over its last farm 30 years ago. She'd moved to Montgomery for her ex-boyfriend, an investment banker who'd promised her they were building a future together. 6 months ago, He'd built a different future with his boss's daughter, leaving Clara with half a lease she couldn't afford and a career that didn't exist in a concrete jungle. Thursday morning, she'd received rejection number 28. Thursday afternoon, she'd gone for a walk in the rain because sitting in her apartment counting her dwindling savings was making her want to scream. And Thursday evening, she'd witnessed something that made her forget her own problems entirely. The black Range Rover hit the puddle with obvious intent. Clara saw it happen from half a block away. The elderly man sitting against the wall, the vehicle accelerating, the driver's face lit with anticipation. She was already running before the water hit, her own umbrella forgotten. "Are you okay? Sir, are you hurt?" The old man looked up at her with eyes that didn't match his clothes, sharp, assessing, alive. "I'm wet, but I've been wetter." "That driver, that was deliberate. Did you see the plate? We should report to who?" His smile was sad and knowing. "The police? They have actual crimes to solve. Rich woman soaks homeless man isn't exactly their priority." Clara helped him to his feet anyway, noting how he moved, stiff, yes, but strong, healthier than his appearance suggested. "Here." She pulled out the $20 bill she'd been saving for groceries. "It's not much, but I can't take your money. Please. I saw what just happened. You shouldn't have to sit in wet clothes all night." She pressed it into his hand before he could refuse again. "There's a shelter 3 blocks south. They're good people. They'll help you." He studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the unsettling feeling she was being evaluated for something beyond this moment. Then he pocketed the bill with a small nod. "What's your name?" "Clara Miles." "And what are you doing walking around in the rain, Clara Miles? You don't look homeless." She laughed, bitter, tired. "Not yet. Give me another month." "Unemployed?" "Worse, educated and unemployed. Agriculture degree in a city that thinks farming means the farmer's market on Saturdays." She wasn't sure why she was telling a stranger this, except that he listened like it mattered. "I've applied everywhere, labs, landscaping companies, conservation groups, even grocery stores. Apparently I'm either overqualified or underexperienced for everything." "Can you grow things?" The question surprised her. "Yes, that's literally what I studied for 4 years." "Then maybe you're looking in the wrong places." He adjusted his soaked coat. "There's land outside the city, empty land that's dying for someone who knows how to bring it back to life. But nobody's farming it because nobody wants to do the work. I want to do the work. I just don't have the land, or the money to lease it, or the equipment to farm it if I did." Clara heard the defeat in her own voice and hated it. "What if someone gave you the land?" "Then I'd ask what the catch was." The old man smiled, a real smile this time, warm and approving. "Smart. There's always a catch. In this case, the catch is it's real work. Dawn to dusk, hands in the dirt, no shortcuts. Most people with your credentials want to supervise farms, not work them." Clara straightened her shoulders. "I'm not most people, and I'm not afraid of dirt." "Good." He pulled a card from his pocket, somehow dry despite everything else being soaked. The paper was thick, expensive, with just a phone number printed in simple black ink. "Call this tomorrow. Tell whoever answers that Elias sent you. They'll explain the opportunity." "I don't understand. Who are you?" "Someone who believes in testing people." He tipped his cap to her. "You passed, Miss Miles. Now let's see if you can farm." He walked away before she could ask anything else, disappearing into the rain like he'd never been there at all. Clara stood on the sidewalk holding an expensive business card, wondering if she'd just been scammed or saved. She called the number the next morning. A woman answered on the first ring, professional, polite, unsurprised. "Reed Agricultural Initiative, how may I help you?" My name is Clara Miles. Someone named Elias gave me this number yesterday. He said I should call about land." "Ah, Miss Miles. We've been expecting your call. Mr. Reed spoke to us last night. Are you available to visit the property this afternoon? We have a car that can collect you." "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. I thought his name was Elias." A pause. "Elias Reed, yes. He prefers his first name, but the program is run through his family trust. Shall we say 2 o'clock? Clara agreed because she had nothing else to do, no other prospects, and because something in that old man's eyes had suggested he was offering more than charity. The car arrived exactly at 2, a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle she'd half expected. The driver was silent but courteous, taking her 20 miles outside the city to where the suburbs gave way to forgotten farmland. The property, when they arrived, took her breath away. 30 acres of rolling hills, currently choked with weeds and neglect, but the soil, God, the soil, rich and dark where the driver's boot had disturbed it. A small house sat at the property's edge, weathered but structurally sound. Beyond it, the bones of old agricultural infrastructure, a barn that needed work, irrigation lines that needed clearing, fence posts that marked where someone had once cared about this land. "It's perfect," Clara whispered. "Then it's yours." The voice came from behind her. Elias, cleaned up now, dressed in simple work clothes, looking entirely different from the soaked beggar of yesterday. "If you want it." Clara spun to face him. "I don't understand. This property is worth more than you can afford." "Yes." He walked past her, surveying the land with obvious affection. "This was my father's farm, where I grew up before I moved to the city and built something different. It's been empty for 15 years. Every season it sits idle, it breaks my heart a little more." "So you're just giving it to me?" "Lending it to you. For 1 year, rent-free. You provide the labor and knowledge. I provide the land and basic equipment. Whatever you grow, you keep the profits. At the end of the year, we evaluate. If you've brought this place back to life, we discuss something more permanent. If not, we part ways. No hard feelings, no debt." "Why?" Claire's voice cracked. "You don't know me. You don't know if I'm any good." Elias turned to face her fully. "Yesterday, a woman in a $60,000 car saw a homeless man and treated him like garbage. You saw the same homeless man and gave him what might have been your last $20. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, the farming skill we'll discover together." "I'm good at farming," Clara said fiercely. "I'm really, really good at it. I just never got the chance to prove it." "Then prove it now." Elias extended his hand. 1 year, Clara Miles. Show me what you can do." She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, the handshake of someone sealing a real deal. "I won't let you down. I know you won't. That's why I chose you." He released her hand and gestured toward the house. "There's a bed, running water, and functioning electricity. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable. Move in whenever you're ready. I'll have equipment delivered Monday. We'll start with soil testing and planning." "We?" "I'm old, Miss Miles. Not dead. I intend to help, at least until my back reminds me why I retired from physical labor." His eyes twinkled. "Besides, I want to see what you can teach me. I suspect it's quite a lot." Clara wanted to cry, wanted to hug this strange, generous man, wanted to sprint across the field screaming with joy. Instead, she nodded professionally, tucked her shaking hands into her pockets, and managed to say, "Monday then. Dawn." "Dawn," he agreed. She moved in that weekend, bringing everything she owned in her beaten Honda Civic, 3 trips worth of boxes, books, and hope. The house was exactly as promised, simple, clean, functional. She spent Saturday scrubbing and Sunday planning, mapping the property in her mind, dividing it into zones based on soil composition and sun exposure. Monday morning, she was in the field before sunrise, kneeling in the dirt, running it through her fingers like prayer. This was real. This was happening. This was her chance. She had no idea that 3 miles away, Julian Reed was preparing to bring Lydia Crow to meet his father. Had no idea that the kind old man who'd given her this opportunity was about to unleash a confrontation that would shatter someone's world. All she knew was the soil, the sunrise, and the overwhelming certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Friday evening arrived with clear skies and the weight of unspoken tension. Julian had invited Lydia to dinner with his father, a significant step in any relationship, particularly one he was secretly questioning. She'd accepted with excitement, already planning her outfit, researching Elias Reed's public persona, preparing to make exactly the right impression. What she hadn't prepared for was the truth. Julian picked her up at 6:30 in his Aston Martin, the one he drove when he wanted to feel something other than the weight of responsibility. Lydia slid into the passenger seat wearing a dress that cost more than some people's monthly rent, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. "Nervous?" Julian asked as they pulled into traffic. Should I be? She checked her reflection in the visor mirror. I'm good with parents. They love me. Julian thought about his father sitting in muddy water while she filmed and laughed. My father isn't like most parents. He's particular about character. Character, Lydia repeated, amused. Darling, I have excellent character. I donate to charity. I volunteer at galas. I'm on 3 nonprofit boards. Do you remember Thursday, 5th and Market? Her hand paused in adjusting her earring. What about it? You drove through a puddle, soaked a homeless man, filmed it. The car's interior went very quiet. When Lydia spoke again, her voice was careful, controlled. That was unfortunate. The street was wet. I didn't see him until too late. These things happen. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Your window was down. You were laughing. I was startled. Sometimes people laugh when they're uncomfortable. You're not actually upset about that, are you? He was fine, probably used to it. Probably used to being humiliated. Used to being wet. He was homeless, Julian. They sleep outside. Water isn't exactly foreign to them. She shifted in her seat, irritation creeping into her tone. Why are we talking about this? Because my father wants to meet the woman I'm dating, and he has particular views about how people treat those with less power. Then I'll be lovely to the waitstaff. Problem solved. Lydia's smile returned, confident and sharp. Trust me, baby. I know how to handle important dinners. They arrived at the Reed estate as sunset painted the sky gold and crimson. The gate opened smoothly, recognizing Julian's car, and they wound through the forest toward the house. Lydia's eyes widened as the mansion came into view, modest by some standards, but clearly expensive, clearly powerful. This is where you grew up? Summers. We had the penthouse in the city for school years. Julian parked by the main entrance, where warm light spilled from tall windows. Ready? Absolutely. Thomas opened the door before they knocked. Good evening, Mr. Julian. Miss Crow. Your father is in the library. The library was Elias's favorite room, floor-to-ceiling books, a fireplace that actually worked, furniture worn comfortable by decades of use. He stood as they entered, dressed in slacks and a cashmere sweater, reading glasses perched on his nose, every inch the retired billionaire at ease in his domain. Lydia's professional smile was already in place as Julian made introductions. Dad, this is Lydia Crow. Lydia, my father, Elias Reed. Mr. Reed, it's such an honor. The words died as recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then white again. Her carefully practiced handshake faltered halfway extended. Elias simply looked at her, his expression neutral, patient, waiting. You. Lydia's voice failed completely. We've met, Elias said quietly, though under different circumstances. Won't you sit down, Miss Crow? Julian watched the color drain from his girlfriend's face and felt something cold settle in his chest. This was the test. This was the moment that would reveal everything. Lydia had 2 choices, own her behavior or deny it. She chose the third option. She ran. Lydia, wait! Julian's voice cut through the library, but she was already moving, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor as she fled toward the entrance hall. He started after her, but his father's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Let her go, Elias said quietly. She needs a moment. A moment? Dad, she just ran out of the room like someone who's been caught, Elias finished. Like someone who knows exactly what she did and can't face the consequences. Give her space to decide who she wants to be next. Julian pulled away from his father's grip, torn between following Lydia and demanding answers. Through the library windows, he could see her standing by his car, one hand pressed against the hood for balance, her shoulders heaving. She was crying, or hyperventilating, he couldn't tell which. You planned this, Julian said, turning back to his father. You knew she wouldn't recognize you at first. You wanted to see her reaction. I wanted to see if she'd tell you the truth. Elias moved to the window, watching Lydia with an expression that mixed pity and disappointment. If she'd come in here, looked at me, and immediately said, Julian, I need to tell you something terrible I did, then we'd be having a very different conversation right now. But she didn't. She tried to pretend she didn't recognize me. She was gonna lie to you, son, right to your face. You don't know that. Don't I? Elias turned from the window. She's been standing by your car for 3 minutes. In that time, she's checked her phone twice, fixed her makeup once, and practiced her expression in your car's side mirror. She's not out there having a moral crisis, Julian. She's out there deciding which story will save her. The words landed like blows because somewhere deep down, Julian knew they were true. He'd watched Lydia navigate social situations for 8 months, watched her adjust her personality like a dial, becoming whoever she needed to be for maximum advantage. He'd thought it was sophistication, adaptability. Now he wondered if it was just performance. I should talk to her, he said finally. Yes, you should. Elias returned to his chair, picked up the book he'd been reading before they arrived. But Julian? Listen to what she doesn't say. Listen to the apologies she makes without naming what she's apologizing for. Listen for whether she's sorry she hurt someone or sorry she got caught. Julian walked out into the cooling evening air. Lydia had composed herself by the time he reached her, tears wiped away, breathing controlled, that familiar smile back in place, though it trembled at the edges. I'm so sorry, she said immediately, reaching for his hands. I panicked. Seeing him there, I didn't know what to do. So you ran. I was embarrassed. Julian, you have to understand, I didn't know that was your father. If you'd known, would you have treated him differently? The question hung between them like smoke. Lydia's hands tightened on his. Of course I would have. Obviously I would have. But he was dressed he looked like someone who deserved to be humiliated? No, that's not what I meant. She pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. You're twisting my words. I made a mistake. I had a bad moment. Haven't you ever made a mistake? I've made hundreds, but I've never filmed someone suffering for entertainment. Lydia's face hardened slightly, just for a second, just enough to show the steel beneath the softness. Is that what he told you? That I filmed him? Julian, I barely even noticed him. The street was wet. I hit a puddle. Water went everywhere. It wasn't personal. Julian pulled out his phone. Show me your Instagram from Thursday. What? You said you barely noticed him, but according to my father, you filmed the whole thing. Said you were posting it to social media, so show me. Prove he's lying. For a long moment, Lydia just stared at him. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You want me to prove I'm telling the truth? After 8 months together, you don't just believe me? After watching you run out of that library, I don't know what to believe. Fine. She yanked out her phone, fingers flying over the screen, but Julian saw it, the slight pause, the thumb hovering over something before moving on. She was deleting evidence, right in front of him. Lydia. What? I'm looking. She scrolled through her feed with exaggerated slowness. See? Nothing from Thursday. No homeless people, no puddles, no horrible humiliation. Your father is mistaken. Or you just deleted it. Her eyes flashed. Now you're accusing me of covering up? Of lying? Because your father, who apparently spends his time playing dress-up on street corners, told you some story? He wasn't playing dress-up. He was testing people. Testing how they treat others when they think no one important is watching. That's insane. That's manipulative. What kind of person does that? The kind who wants to protect his son from someone who values status over humanity. The words came out harsher than Julian intended, but he didn't take them back. Lydia recoiled as if he'd struck her. So that's it? That's what this is about? Your father doesn't approve, so you're throwing away 8 months? Her voice rose, cracking with genuine anger now. I've been patient, Julian. I've dealt with your schedule, your obsession with work, your inability to commit to anything real. I've smiled through boring business dinners and made nice with your corporate friends, and never once complained that you keep me at arm's length. And now, one misunderstanding with your eccentric father, and you're ready to believe I'm some kind of monster? You still haven't apologized for what you did. You've only apologized for getting caught. Because I didn't do anything wrong. If your father wants to spend his time pretending to be homeless, that's his choice. But he doesn't get to judge me for not recognizing his little test. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something more intimate, more calculated. Baby, this is crazy. We're good together. You know we are. Don't let one weird evening destroy what we've built. Julian looked at her, really looked at her. The beautiful face he'd woken up next to, the sharp mind he'd enjoyed sparring with, the confident presence he'd appreciated at his side. All of it still there, still real. But behind it, he saw something else now. A coldness that had always been there, just hidden beneath the warmth. A willingness to hurt others that she excused as strength. A belief that kindness was weakness and power was the only truth that mattered. What we built, he said slowly, was a relationship where I never really knew who you were, where you showed me what I wanted to see and hid everything else. Everyone does that. That's called dating. You think you showed me your whole self from day one? She was crying now, angry tears that made her mascara run. You think I don't know you keep parts of yourself locked away? At least I tried to be what you needed. I needed someone real, someone honest, someone who treats a homeless stranger with the same dignity they'd treat a billionaire. Well, I guess I failed your test then. Lydia wiped her eyes roughly, smearing black across her perfect cheekbones. Congratulations, Julian. Your father wins. He gets to keep you all to himself in that mansion, playing his sick little games, judging the rest of us for being human. Being human doesn't mean being cruel, and being rich doesn't make you morally superior. But you read men sure like to think it does. She grabbed her purse from his car, started walking toward the gate. I'll call a car. Don't worry about me getting home. Wouldn't want to inconvenience you. Julian watched her go, expecting to feel regret or loss. Instead, he felt something closer to relief, like removing a splinter he'd gotten so used to, he'd forgotten it was there. His father was still in the library when he returned, though the book lay closed on his lap now. She's gone, Julian said. I heard. Elias studied his son's face. How do you feel? Like I've been sleepwalking for 8 months and just woke up. Julian collapsed into the chair across from his father. She deleted the video. Right in front of me, she deleted it, and then tried to convince me it never existed. People do terrible things to protect their image. It doesn't always mean they're terrible people. You're defending her now? I'm giving her the same grace I give everyone. The assumption that they're capable of change. But capability and willingness are different things. Your Lydia didn't strike me as willing. She's not my Lydia anymore. Julian rubbed his face. God, I feel like an idiot. 8 months. How did I not see it? Because you were lonely. Because she's beautiful and smart and knew exactly how to fill the spaces you've left empty. Because sometimes we see what we want to see until reality forces us to look closer. Elias leaned forward. This isn't your failure, son. It's hers. She had a choice tonight. Own her mistake or bury it. She chose burial. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, the house settling around them. Finally, Julian asked the question that had been gnawing at him since his father first mentioned the test. How long have you been doing this? Dressing up, testing people? 3 weeks. This was my last day, actually. I'd learned what I needed to learn. Which was? That kindness still exists. That there are people in this city who see human beings instead of status symbols. That wealth hasn't completely rotted Montgomery's soul. Elias smiled. I met a woman Thursday, young, unemployed, probably down to her last few dollars. She saw me soaking wet and gave me $20. Insisted I take it, even though she clearly needed it more than I did. What happened to her? I gave her a farm. Julian laughed, startled, genuine. You what? The old family property, 30 acres sitting empty, slowly dying. She's an agriculture graduate with no opportunities, so I gave her one. 1 year to prove she can bring the land back to life. If she succeeds, we make it permanent. Dad, you can't just give away property to strangers. I can do whatever I want. It's my property. Elias stood, moved to the window overlooking the dark gardens. That woman, Clara Miles, she didn't hesitate to help someone she thought was homeless. Didn't check my credentials or calculate the return on investment. She just saw someone in need and acted. That's worth more than any credentials, any pedigree, any social connection. You think I should meet her? It wasn't a question. I think you should focus on yourself for a while. Figure out who you are when you're not performing for someone else. Elias turned back from the window. But yes, eventually, I think you'd like her. She's real in a way most people aren't. Julian wanted to argue, wanted to insist he wasn't interested in his father's matchmaking schemes, but part of him, the part that had just watched Lydia lie to his face, was curious about someone who'd passed his father's impossible test. "What's she like?" he asked, despite himself. "Fierce, smart, unafraid of work. She moved into the farmhouse 3 days ago, and she's already mapped the entire property, tested the soil, and designed a rotation plan that would make my father weep with joy." Elias's face softened with genuine affection. "She reminds me of your mother, actually. Same fire, same refusal to accept limitations." The comparison stabbed Julian's heart. His mother had died when he was 12, leaving a hole that 20 years hadn't filled. He barely remembered her voice anymore, but he remembered her kindness, the way she'd treated everyone like they mattered, from CEOs to custodians. "I'm not ready," he said quietly. "I know, that's why I'm not pushing. Just keep an open mind. When the time is right, I'll introduce you properly." Elias moved toward the door. "Come on, Thomas made enough food for an army. Let's not let it go to waste." They ate dinner in the smaller dining room, just the two of them, the way they used to when Julian was younger. They talked about business, about the merger, about politics and philosophy, and everything except relationships. It felt good, Julian realized. Normal, like he could breathe fully for the first time in months. Around 10, his phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" He showed it to his father. "What do you want to do?" Elias asked. Julian thought about it. Really thought about it. About the 8 months they'd spent together, the moments that had felt real and the ones that now seemed scripted. About the woman who'd helped a stranger without hesitation and the woman who'd filmed suffering for likes. About the kind of person he wanted to be and the kind of person he wanted beside him. He deleted the text without responding. "Good," Elias said simply. Julian drove back to the city that night with his windows down, the cool air clearing his head. His penthouse felt different when he arrived, too big, too empty, designed for someone he wasn't sure he wanted to be anymore. He poured himself a drink, stood at the window overlooking Montgomery, and wondered what Clara Miles was doing right now on that farm. Probably sleeping, he decided. Early to bed, early to rise, hands dirty and heart clean. He envied her that simplicity. 3 miles away, in a small farmhouse surrounded by fields she was determined to resurrect, Clara was not sleeping. She was sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by soil samples and agricultural journals, planning her war against decades of neglect. The work was overwhelming, the odds were impossible, and she'd never been happier. Elias had visited that afternoon, bringing equipment and questions in equal measure. They'd spent 4 hours walking the property, discussing drainage and crop rotation and the particular challenges of bringing dead soil back to life. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she answered, treated her like an expert instead of a charity case. "You're good at this," he'd said as the sun set over the western field. "Better than I expected. Did you expect me to fail?" "I expected you to be learning, but you already know. You just needed the space to prove it." He'd smiled at her surprise. "I've built a lot of things in my life, Clara. Companies, buildings, fortunes. But I never built anything that grows. Never created something alive. That's your gift, not mine." Now alone in the quiet house, Clara let herself feel the full weight of the opportunity she'd been given. 1 year. 12 months to prove she wasn't just book smart, but dirt wise. To show that kindness given to a stranger wasn't wasted, but invested. She thought about Elias, the contrast between the soaked old man she'd met on the street and the sharp-minded landowner who'd tested her knowledge all afternoon. There was a sadness in him she'd noticed, a loneliness that came from being surrounded by people who wanted his money, but not his company. "Do you have family?" she'd asked as they walked back to the farmhouse. "A son, brilliant man, built an empire twice the size of mine. But he's lost, I think, searching for something real in a world of transactions. Maybe he'll find it. Maybe." Elias had paused at the gate, looking back over the land. "You know what this property needs most? Not just good farming. It needs to be loved again. My father loved this land, talked to it, sang to it, treated every seed like a promise. After he died, it became just another asset, just another line on a balance sheet. That's when it started dying. I'll love it, Clara had promised. I'll bring it back. I believe you will. Now she made herself a cup of tea and returned to her planning. The spring planting season was 8 weeks away, barely enough time to prepare the soil, let alone design a comprehensive agricultural strategy. But she'd do it. She'd work 20-hour days if she had to. This was her shot, and she wasn't going to waste it. Her phone rang at 11:30. Her mother calling from the 2-bedroom apartment Clara had grown up in, 400 miles away, in a town that was slowly dying from factory closures and brain drain. "Baby, it's late there. You okay?" "I'm perfect, Mom." Better than perfect. Clara filled her in on the week's developments, the farm, the opportunity, Elias's generosity. She left out the part about him testing people in disguise, some things her mother didn't need to worry about. "This man just gave you 30 acres for free? It's a loan for a year. I have to prove I can make it work." "And if you can't?" Clara looked out her kitchen window at the dark fields waiting for her. "Then at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have had this moment where someone believed I was worth the risk." "Oh, honey," her mother's voice cracked. "I always believed that. I just didn't have a farm to give you. You gave me everything that matters. The farm's just dirt. You gave me the knowledge of what to do with it." They talked for another hour, about Clara's father who'd passed 3 years ago, about her younger sister finishing college, about the ache of being far from family but close to dreams. When they finally hung up, Clara felt both homesick and homefound, missing what she'd left behind but excited for what lay ahead. She fell asleep at her table, head pillowed on agricultural journals, dreaming of green things growing. The weekend passed in a blur of work and planning. Elias visited both days, bringing coffee and conversation, helping where his aging body allowed, supervising where it didn't. They worked side by side clearing irrigation channels, their hands dirty, their conversation ranging from farming to philosophy to the particular loneliness of being good at something no one values. "You know what I miss most about being young?" Elias asked on Sunday afternoon, taking a break from clearing brush. "The certainty. The belief that if you just worked hard enough, did the right things, the world would recognize your worth." "You don't believe that anymore?" "I believe the world recognizes power and profit. Worth is something different, something harder to measure." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "But every now and then, you meet someone who still measures things the old way, by character, by kindness, by what they build instead of what they take. Those people give me hope." Clara thought about the $20 she'd given him, about how small that gesture had seemed at the time and how much it had changed her life. "I almost didn't help you that day. I almost walked past like everyone else." "But you didn't." "Only because I've been invisible too. I know what it feels like to be looked through instead of at." She returned to her work, attacking the weeds with renewed vigor. When you're unemployed in a city like Montgomery, you become part of the scenery. People don't see you. They see what you represent: failure, bad luck, something they're afraid of becoming. It's easier to look away. And yet you looked. "I looked because someone looked at me once, when I needed it. Paid it forward, I guess." Elias was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, "My son broke up with his girlfriend Friday night." Clara paused in her work, unsure why he was telling her this. "I'm sorry?" "Don't be. She was wrong for him. Beautiful, accomplished, connected, everything he thought he wanted. But she was cruel to people she considered beneath her. Filmed a homeless man for entertainment. Laughed while he suffered." The words hit Clara like cold water. "The woman in the Range Rover, that was your son's girlfriend?" "Was. Past tense." Elias met her eyes. "He didn't know what she'd done until I told him. The moment he found out, he ended it, because he's a good man, Clara. A lonely man, a confused man, but a good one, and he deserves someone who sees people the way you do." "Mr. Reed, I'm not matchmaking. God knows I'm too old for that nonsense. I'm just planting seeds, seeing what grows." He smiled at his own metaphor. "You're both starting over. You with this farm, him with his life. Maybe someday those paths will cross. Maybe they won't. Either way, you should know there are still good people in the world. Even in penthouse apartments. Even running billion-dollar companies." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she returned to her work, her mind churning. The woman who'd humiliated Elias had been dating his son, had probably been heading toward marriage, toward joining one of the wealthiest families in the state, and she'd thrown it all away in a moment of casual cruelty. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it just felt sad. That evening, after Elias left and Clara was alone again, she found herself thinking about the son she'd never met, wondering what kind of man would end an 8-month relationship based on one incident, either someone with impossibly high standards or someone who'd been looking for a reason to escape. She hoped it was the latter, hoped he'd found freedom in that ending, not just loss. But it wasn't her business, wasn't her concern. She had 30 acres to resurrect and 12 months to do it. Romance, if it ever came again, would have to wait. She showered off the day's dirt, made herself a simple dinner, and was asleep by 9, her body exhausted and her spirit quietly, stubbornly hopeful. In the city, Julian was having a very different kind of evening. Lydia had called 6 times, texted twice that number, and finally shown up at his building's lobby, demanding to see him. Security had called up, and Julian had told them to send her away. He'd heard her shouting through the phone, something about humiliation and betrayal, and how dare he treat her like this after everything she'd given him. He'd hung up and blocked her number. Now he sat in his penthouse, drinking expensive scotch and feeling nothing at all. Not regret, not relief, not even anger. Just a hollow space where certainty used to live. His father was right. He'd been sleepwalking, playing a part in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within. And he had no idea how to wake up, how to find something real in a world built on transactions and appearances. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, back to the merger, the meetings, the endless performance of being Julian Reed, heir and executor, master of his universe. But tonight, just for tonight, he let himself wonder what it would be like to start over, to walk away from the empire and find something that mattered beyond profit margins and stock prices. His phone buzzed. Not Lydia this time, but his assistant, with tomorrow's schedule. 18 meetings, back to back, starting at 7 in the morning. Julian looked at the message and felt something inside him rebel. He texted back, "Cancel everything before noon, personal matter." Then he opened his laptop and typed 3 words into the search bar: Reed Agricultural Initiative. The website was simple, professional, outlining the program his father had created, providing land and resources to promising young farmers who lacked capital. Clara Miles's name wasn't listed anywhere, but the mission statement was pure Elias: investing in people who grow things that matter. Julian sat back, his scotch forgotten, an idea taking shape in his mind. His father wanted him to meet this woman eventually, wanted to see if lightning would strike twice. But Julian was tired of waiting for life to happen to him, tired of letting other people orchestrate his story. He'd meet Clara Miles on his own terms, in his own time. But first, he'd figure out who he was when no one was watching, when no one was keeping score. He'd take his father's test for himself. Monday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter dawn that made everything look sharp-edged and new. Clara was already in the east field by 6, her breath misting in the air as she marked stakes for soil testing. The land stretched before her like a promise waiting to be kept, and she attacked it with the focused intensity of someone who'd been given one chance and refused to waste it. She didn't hear the car approaching until it was almost upon her, not the sedan Thomas usually drove, but something lower, faster, expensive in a way that made her immediately self-conscious of her muddy boots and work clothes. The Aston Martin pulled to a stop near the barn, and a man climbed out, dressed too well for farm work in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. Clara's first thought was that he was lost. Her second thought, when he started walking toward her with obvious purpose, was that he was inspecting the property for Elias. Her third thought, when she got close enough to see his face clearly, stopped her completely. He looked like Elias, not identically, but enough that the relationship was unmistakable. The same sharp intelligence in his eyes, the same way of moving that suggested power held carefully in check. This had to be the son, the one who'd just ended things with the Range Rover woman, the billionaire who was supposedly lost and searching. He didn't look lost. He looked determined. "Clara Miles?" His voice was smooth, educated, carefully neutral. "That's me. And you're trespassing." She hadn't meant to be rude, but she was protective of this space already, wary of anyone who might threaten it. This is private property. I know, my father owns it. He extended his hand. Julian Reed, I hope I'm not interrupting. She looked at his hand, clean, uncalloused, the hand of someone who worked with his mind instead of his back. Then she looked at her own hands covered in dirt and God knew what else. I'm filthy. You probably don't want to. I don't care about dirt. He kept his hand extended, patient. Please. Clara wiped her palm on her jeans and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and over too quickly. Your father didn't mention you were coming. He doesn't know I'm here. I wanted to see the farm, meet the woman he's been talking about all weekend. Julian glanced around the property, taking in the marked stakes, the cleared irrigation channels, the obvious signs of recent work. He said you're bringing this place back to life. Looks like you're making progress. It's early days, I've barely scratched the surface. Clara felt defensive suddenly, like she needed to justify her presence here to this man who'd grown up with everything while she'd scraped for every opportunity. But I know what I'm doing. Your father didn't make a mistake choosing me. I didn't say he did. Julian's expression softened slightly. Actually, knowing my father, you probably passed the hardest test anyone's ever given you. He doesn't trust easily. He shouldn't. Most people are disappointing. The words came out sharper than she intended, and she saw Julian flinch slightly. Sorry, that was harsh. No, it was honest. I appreciate honesty. He moved closer to the field, studying the way she'd marked her testing grid. What are you measuring? pH levels, nitrogen content, mineral composition. This land's been dormant for 15 years. I need to know what it's lacking before I can fix it. She joined him at the field's edge, relaxing slightly as the conversation shifted to familiar territory. Your father said this was your grandfather's farm? And his father's before that. 4 generations of Reeds worked this soil. Julian's voice carried something like grief. Then my father moved to the city, built Reed Industries, and this place became a memory. A nice idea we visited on holidays, but never really honored. It's not too late to honor it now, isn't it? The farm's been dead for over a decade. The topsoil's degraded. The infrastructure's falling apart. The market for small-scale agriculture barely exists anymore. He turned to face her fully. What makes you think you can succeed where economic reality says you'll fail? Clara bristled at the challenge. Because economic reality doesn't account for passion or knowledge, or the fact that people are starting to care again about where their food comes from, how it's grown, what it costs the earth. She pointed to the western section of the property. That soil is some of the richest I've ever tested. It's been resting, not dying. Give it the right inputs, the right care, and it'll produce better than anything you can buy from industrial agriculture. You sound very certain. I am certain. This is what I studied for 4 years, what I've wanted to do my entire life. Your father gave me the resources to prove I'm right. I'm not going to fail him. Julian studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable sensation of being evaluated for something beyond her farming expertise. He talks about you the way he used to talk about my mother, like you're someone rare, someone real. The comparison caught her off guard. I'm not rare. I'm just honest about what I care about and what I don't. In my experience, that makes you extremely rare. Julian checked his watch. Expensive, understated, probably worth more than her car. I have meetings starting at noon, but I'd like to come back if that's okay. Maybe help with the work. I used to spend summers here as a kid back when my grandfather was still alive. I know my way around a farm. You want to help? You? Clara couldn't keep the skepticism out of her voice. No offense, but you look like manual labor would break you. He laughed, genuine, surprised. Fair assessment based on appearances, but I'm stronger than I look, and I could use some time away from boardrooms and conference calls. Somewhere I can think clearly. This isn't a therapy retreat. It's actual work. Dawn to dusk, no shortcuts, no complaining when your back hurts or your hands blister. I understand, and I'm not asking for special treatment. Just a chance to be useful. Something in his expression shifted, became more vulnerable. I'm at a crossroads, Clara, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing the role everyone expects. This place, it's where my father learned what mattered. Maybe I can learn the same thing. Clara wanted to say no, wanted to protect her space from this wealthy stranger, who might get bored after an hour and leave her to clean up his mess. But she recognized the look in his eyes, the same desperate hope she'd felt standing in the rain, wondering if her life would ever start. Fine, but you work, you don't supervise. You get dirty, you don't delegate. And if you break something expensive because you don't know what you're doing, you're replacing it. Deal. Julian extended his hand again, and this time when Clara shook it, she felt calluses starting to form on his palm. Maybe he was stronger than he looked. I'm here most mornings by 6, she said, releasing his hand. If you're serious, be on time. I won't wait for you. I'll be here. He left shortly after, his Aston Martin kicking up dust as it disappeared down the access road. Clara watched him go, then returned to her work, trying to ignore the complication he represented. She didn't need distractions, didn't need the billionaire's son playing farmer while she was trying to build something real. But part of her, the part that had been lonely since moving to Montgomery, since losing her relationship and her career prospects, was curious. Curious about who Julian Reed was beneath the expensive clothes and perfect manners. Curious about what kind of man would walk away from everything comfortable to get his hands dirty. She'd find out tomorrow, she supposed, if he actually showed up. He showed up at 5:50 the next morning, dressed in clothes that were still too nice for farm work, but at least looked worn in, jeans that had seen actual use, a flannel shirt that might have been his grandfather's, work boots that were broken in properly. Clara was already in the barn organizing equipment when she heard his car. "You're early," she called out without turning around. "Didn't want you to think I wasn't serious." Julian appeared in the barn doorway, backlit by the rising sun. "What are we doing today?" "Today, we're fixing the irrigation system in the south field. It's been clogged for over a decade, which means digging out old pipes, checking for damage, and replacing anything that's corroded beyond repair." She handed him a shovel. "Think you can handle that? Let's find out." They worked in silence for the first hour, both of them testing the boundaries of this unexpected partnership. Clara watched Julian out of the corner of her eye, waiting for him to slow down, to complain, to reveal himself as a tourist playing at poverty. But he kept pace, his technique rough but determined, his focus absolute. Around 8, they took a break. Clara offered him water from the cooler she'd brought, and they sat in the dirt, both of them breathing hard. "Your father didn't tell you I was coming, did he?" Julian asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "No, he mentioned you existed, but that's about it." Clara drank deeply, her throat dry from exertion. "Should he have warned me?" "Probably. I have a tendency to complicate things." He looked out over the field, squinting against the morning light. "He told you about my breakup?" "He mentioned it, said she was cruel to someone she thought was powerless." Clara paused, choosing her words carefully. "He said you ended it the moment you found out. I should have seen it sooner, should have recognized the signs. But I was—" Julian stopped, seemed to reconsider what he was about to say. "I was playing a part. Successful billionaire, perfect life, beautiful girlfriend, all the right pieces in all the right places. It looked good from the outside. But it felt empty on the inside." "Exactly." He turned to look at her, and Clara was struck by how tired he seemed despite his youth. "How did you know?" "Because I've been there. Different circumstances, same feeling. My ex wanted me to be someone I wasn't, someone social and outgoing and excited about cocktail parties and networking events, someone who fit into his world. When I couldn't be that person, when I wanted to talk about soil composition instead of stock portfolios, he found someone who could." She shrugged. "Hurt at the time. But looking back, he did me a favor. I would have been miserable trying to be her." "My father said you remind him of my mother." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Clara didn't fully understand. "I never met your mother." "Neither did most people, really. She died when I was 12. Julian's voice went distant, remembering. "But everyone who knew her says the same thing. She was genuine, unafraid to be herself even when it made people uncomfortable. She'd show up to charity galas in simple dresses while everyone else wore designer gowns. She'd spend more time talking to the servers than the donors. She made my father better just by being exactly who she was." "That's a lot to live up to." "I'm not asking you to live up to anything. I'm just—" He stopped, frustrated with himself. "I'm explaining why my father likes you, why he's invested in your success. You're proof that people like my mother still exist, that kindness isn't extinct. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she returned to work, and Julian followed. They spent the rest of the morning wrestling with pipes and mud, the physical labor creating a kind of meditation that required no words. By lunchtime, they'd cleared 300 feet of irrigation line and confirmed what Clara had suspected. The system was salvageable with work and patience. Same time tomorrow? Julian asked as they packed up the tools. If you want. But Julian, I need to know this isn't just some whim, some wealthy guy's experiment in slumming it, because I'm building something real here, and I can't have you treating it like a hobby. It's not a hobby. His voice was quiet but certain. It's the first thing I've cared about in years that isn't connected to profit margins or shareholder value. He gestured helplessly at the field. It's real. You're right about that. And I need real right now more than I need anything else. She believed him. Against her better judgment, against every instinct that said wealthy people were fundamentally different from her, she believed him. Okay, tomorrow then, but we're starting on the North Field equipment shed. It's a disaster, and it'll take all day to organize. I'll be here. He was. And the day after that, and the day after that, a pattern emerged. Julian arriving before dawn, working until he had to leave for afternoon meetings, returning sometimes in the evening to work until dark. He learned quickly, his natural intelligence translating to practical skill faster than Clara expected. Within a week, he could operate most of the equipment. Within 2, he was anticipating what she needed before she asked. They didn't talk much while they worked, but the silence between them grew comfortable, familiar. Sometimes Julian would ask questions about farming techniques or soil management, and Clara would explain with the passion of someone finally getting to use her expertise. Sometimes Clara would ask about his business, and Julian would describe the merger he was navigating with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "Why do you do it?" she asked one afternoon as they repaired fence posts. "If it makes you this tired, this stressed, why not walk away?" "Because it's my father's legacy. Because thousands of people depend on Reed Industries for their livelihoods. Because I'm good at it, even if I don't love it." He hammered a post with more force than necessary. "Because I don't know what else I'd do." "You could do this. Farm. Build something that grows." Julian smiled sadly. "I don't think the world needs another billionaire playing at being a farmer. It needs people like you, people who actually know what they're doing. You're learning. I'm helping. There's a difference." He wiped sweat from his face. "But I appreciate you letting me try." The third week, Elias visited and found them working side by side in the equipment barn, both of them covered in grease from repairing a tractor engine. He stood in the doorway for a full minute before either of them noticed him. "Well," he said finally, his voice carrying obvious amusement, "this is unexpected." Julian looked up from the engine, guilt flashing across his face. "Dad, I was going to tell you that you've been sneaking out here every morning for 3 weeks. Thomas told me. He's terrible at keeping secrets." Elias moved into the barn, studying his son with open curiosity. "When you canceled all those meetings, I assumed you were having a breakdown. I didn't realize you were having a breakthrough. I needed to understand why you believe in this so much, why you gave Clara this opportunity." Julian gestured at the farm around them. "Now I get it. This place, it's honest. The work either gets done or it doesn't. The crops either grow or they die. There's no spin, no performance, no pretending something matters when it doesn't. And you needed that honesty. I needed to remember what it feels like to build something real." Julian's voice cracked slightly. "To care about something beyond quarterly earnings and market share." Elias looked between his son and Clara, and something knowing crossed his face. "Clara, have you been taking care of my boy?" "He's been taking care of himself," Clara said firmly. "I just pointed him at work that needed doing. He's done the rest." She's being modest. She's been teaching me everything. Julian smiled at Clara with genuine warmth. "Did you know there are 17 different factors that affect soil pH? Or that you can predict rain 3 days out by watching how certain plants respond to barometric pressure? Or that—" "Julian's been a good student," Clara interrupted, suddenly shy under Elias's knowing gaze. "And a good worker. He's earned his place here." "I have no doubt." Elias clasped his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you. Your mother would be proud of you. Julian's eyes went bright with unshed tears. Don't. I'm barely holding it together as it is. Good. Falling apart is the first step toward putting yourself back together properly. Elias released his son and turned to Clara. And you? How's the progress? Ahead of schedule. The irrigation system's functional, the equipment's repaired, and I've completed soil amendments on 15 acres. If the weather holds, I can start planting in 4 weeks instead of 8. Excellent. And my son's been useful? Surprisingly, yes. Hey, Julian protested, but he was smiling. They had lunch together, sandwiches Clara had made that morning, eaten sitting on hay bales in the barn, while Elias told stories about Julian's grandfather, about the years this farm had fed not just their family, but half the county. Julian listened with an intensity Clara recognized, the hunger of someone reconnecting with roots they'd forgotten existed. After Elias left, they returned to work, but something had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was eroding, replaced by something warmer, more complicated. Thank you, Julian said as the sun set and they finished for the day. For letting me be part of this. For not treating me like an intruder. You earned your place. Clara locked the barn, pocketing the key. Same time tomorrow? Actually, Julian hesitated, then continued in a rush. Would you want to have dinner? Not here, in the city, somewhere nice. My way of saying thank you for 3 weeks of education. Clara's heart jumped, then immediately filled with caution. Julian, as friends, he added quickly, I just ended a relationship. I'm not looking for, I just want to spend time with you somewhere that isn't covered in mud. That's all. She wanted to say yes. Wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in a long time. But she'd learned to be careful with wanting, learned that hope was dangerous when mixed with power imbalances and different worlds. I don't have anything to wear to somewhere nice. My wardrobe consists of work clothes and more work clothes. Then somewhere not nice, somewhere normal. Pizza? Burgers? Whatever you want. Clara looked at him. This man who'd shown up every morning for 3 weeks, who'd worked without complaining, who'd listened to her talk about farming like it mattered, who looked at her like she was someone worth knowing instead of someone worth using. There's a diner on Route 9, best pie in the state, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Dutch treat. Dutch treat, Julian agreed, his smile bright enough to rival the setting sun. Clara drove home that night with her heart doing complicated things in her chest, half terrified and half thrilled by what she'd just agreed to. This wasn't a date, she told herself. This was just dinner between friends who happened to work together. Nothing more. But the butterflies in her stomach suggested otherwise. The diner was exactly as Clara had promised. Vinyl booze, checkered floors, a jukebox that actually worked. Julian arrived 5 minutes early and found Clara already there, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that somehow looked more elegant than anything Lydia had ever worn. You made it, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Did you think I wouldn't? Part of me thought you'd realize this was a terrible idea and text me some excuse. She handed him a laminated menu. The pie's great, but the meatloaf is what keeps people coming back. They ordered meatloaf for him, country fried steak for her, coffee for both. The waitress, a woman in her 60s who'd clearly worked there since the diner opened, winked at Clara as she took their order. She thinks we're on a date, Clara said when the waitress left. Are we? Julian asked, then immediately backtracked. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You didn't. I need to know what this is, what we're doing, because I like working with you. I like having you at the farm. But if this is going somewhere complicated, I need to protect myself. Julian leaned back in the booth, considering his words carefully. Honest answer? I don't know what this is. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Perfect girlfriend, successful career, clear path forward. Then my father sat in mud while that perfect girlfriend laughed, and everything I thought I knew fell apart. He met Clara's eyes. You're the first person in years who's treated me like I'm just Julian. Not Julian Reed billionaire, not Julian Reed eligible bachelor, just someone who shows up to work and does his job. That's rare. That's real, Clara finished. Exactly. So if you're asking whether I want this to become something more than friendship, the answer is I don't know yet. I'm not ready for more. I'm barely holding myself together as it is, But I know I want to keep showing up, keep working beside you, keep learning what matters. He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Is that enough? For now? Clara looked at his hand, so close to hers, and felt the pull of possibility. She could close that distance, let this become what it wanted to become. Or she could protect herself, maintain the boundaries that kept her safe. She chose the middle path. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't pull away either. For now, she agreed. But Julian, when you figure out what you want, you need to tell me. I won't be someone's experiment in authenticity. I won't be the farm girl who teaches the billionaire about real life before he goes back to his real world. That's not what this is, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're on a journey of self-discovery, and I'm convenient. I'm different from your world, which makes me interesting. But interesting and lasting aren't the same thing. The words landed hard and Julian flinched, but he didn't deny them. You're right to be cautious. My track record for seeing people clearly isn't great. But Clara, you're not convenient. You're not some exotic experience I'm collecting. You're someone I respect, someone I'm learning from, He stopped, regrouped. Someone I want to know better. That's all I can promise right now. Their food arrived, saving them from the conversation's intensity. They ate in silence for a while, the diner's background noise filling the spaces between them. Finally, Clara spoke. I had a boyfriend in college, pre-med, brilliant, going places. He was everything my parents dreamed of, stable, ambitious, kind. We dated for 2 years. I thought we'd get married. She pushed food around her plate. Then my father died, and I had to leave school for a semester to help my mom. When I came back, my boyfriend had moved on. Found someone else. Someone who didn't have baggage, didn't need time to grieve, didn't complicate his perfect future. I'm sorry. I'm not. Not anymore. Because it taught me something important. People who love you don't leave when things get complicated. They stay. They adjust. They figure it out together. She looked up at Julian. So when I ask what this is, what I'm really asking is whether you're someone who stays or someone who leaves when the interesting part ends. Julian set down his fork, his expression serious. I don't know how to answer that without sounding like I'm making promises I can't keep. 3 weeks ago, I would have said I stay. I'm loyal. I'm committed. I see things through. But I also stayed with Lydia for 8 months without seeing who she really was. I stayed in a life that was killing me slowly because leaving felt impossible. So clearly, my judgment about what's worth staying for needs work. At least you're honest about it. It's all I can be right now. He smiled sadly. Ask me again in 3 months. Maybe I'll have a better answer. They finished dinner, split the check exactly down the middle despite Julian's protests, and walked out into the cold night air. Julian had parked next to Clara's Honda, and they stood between their cars, the moment stretching awkward and charged. Same time tomorrow? Clara asked. We need to start planning the spring planting. I'll be there. Julian hesitated, then added, Thank you. For dinner. For honesty. For not making this easier than it should be. If I made it easy, you wouldn't learn anything. True. He moved toward his car, then stopped. Clara? For what it's worth, I'm glad my father met you first. Glad he tested you and you passed. Because if he hadn't, I never would have found this place. Found this version of myself that actually likes getting up in the morning. He left before she could respond, his Aston Martin disappearing into the night. Clara stood in the parking lot for a long time, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart doing that complicated dance between hope and fear. She was falling for him. Despite every warning she'd given herself, despite the obvious complications, despite the fact that he was still figuring himself out, she was falling. And she had no idea if he'd be there to catch her when she finally let go. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt both natural and fragile, like something precious that might shatter if either of them acknowledged it too directly. Julian showed up every morning before dawn, and together they transformed the farm from abandoned dream to working reality. The spring planting began in early March, and Clara attacked it with the fierce joy of someone finally doing what she was born to do. Julian learned to read the land the way Clara did, understanding that farming wasn't just science but instinct, observation, patience. He learned which plants thrived in morning sun and which needed afternoon shade, Learned the difference between soil that was ready and soil that needed another week to rest. He learned to trust Claire's judgment even when it contradicted everything logic suggested. "We're planting the tomatoes too early," he said one morning, checking the calendar against the frost dates. "We could lose everything if we get a cold snap." "We won't." Claire didn't look up from the seedlings she was transplanting. "Feel the air, smell it. The season's turned. We're safe." "You can't know that." "I can know that. You're just learning to trust it." She straightened, wiping dirt on her jeans. "Farming isn't about controlling nature, Julian. It's about working with it, reading the signs it gives you. The birds are nesting 2 weeks early. The oak trees budded out last week. The soil temperature's been stable for 10 days. All of that tells me we're past the danger." He planted the tomatoes. 2 days later, the weather service predicted a late frost. Julian spent the entire night awake, convinced they'd lose the crop, convinced Claire's instinct would prove wrong. The temperature dropped to 34 degrees, just above freezing, and held there until morning. "You worried all night, didn't you?" Claire asked when he arrived looking exhausted. "Maybe. You need to trust me, or trust the land, or trust something beyond spreadsheets and data models." She handed him coffee, her fingers brushing his in a way that felt both accidental and inevitable. "Not everything worth knowing can be measured, Julian." "I'm learning that." He sipped the coffee, grateful for its warmth. Among other things, they developed a careful dance around what was growing between them, acknowledging it in small gestures but never speaking it aloud. Julian would bring her coffee in the mornings, made exactly how she liked it. Clara would save him the best sandwiches at lunch, the ones with extra tomatoes she knew he preferred. They'd work side by side in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. But they didn't touch beyond what work required, didn't let their evening conversations drift too far into personal territory, maintained the fiction that this was just friendship, just partnership, just two people building something green and growing. Elias watched it all with obvious satisfaction, visiting the farm twice a week and pretending not to notice the way his son looked at Clara when she wasn't watching, or the way Clara's whole face softened when Julian laughed. "You're playing a dangerous game," he told Julian one afternoon when Clara was in the far field, "pretending you don't feel what you feel." "I'm not ready," Julian said for the 100th time. "She deserves better than someone who's still figuring himself out. She deserves honesty, and you're lying to her every day by pretending this is just about farming." Elias's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mother used to say that love is like farming. It needs the right conditions, yes, but mostly it needs courage. The courage to plant something before you're certain it'll grow. The courage to tend it even when you're afraid it'll fail. What if I hurt her? What if I'm not capable of being what she needs? Then you hurt her, and she hurts you. And you both survive and learn and become better people for it." Elias gripped his son's shoulder. "But if you keep her at arm's length because you're afraid, you'll lose her anyway, and you'll never forgive yourself for it." Julian knew his father was right. But knowing and acting were different things, and the fear of failing Clara the way he'd failed to see Lydia clearly kept him paralyzed. Meanwhile, in the city, Lydia Crow was having a very different kind of spring. The humiliation of being dumped by Julian Reed, of losing access to that wealth, that status, that perfect life she'd almost secured, had transformed into something darker than embarrassment. It had become obsession. She'd tried apologizing, tried explaining, tried showing up at Julian's office, his penthouse, the charity events she knew he'd attend. He'd blocked her calls, refused her emails, had security escort her out of buildings. The more he rejected her, the more she needed to reclaim what she'd lost. Not because she loved him. She'd never loved him, if she was being honest with herself. But she'd loved what he represented, the culmination of her ambitions, the proof that Lydia Crow could have anything she wanted. And now that proof had been stolen from her by a meddling old man and his ridiculous test. She'd tried to move on, tried dating other wealthy men, but none of them measured up. None of them had Julian's particular combination of power and vulnerability, brilliance and loneliness. None of them made her feel like she'd won the way Julian had. So she did what any rational person would do. She hired a private investigator. The investigator was expensive, discreet, and very good at his job. Within a week, he'd compiled a comprehensive report on Julian's activities since their breakup. The morning farm visits. The woman named Clara Miles. The transformation from depressed recluse to someone who actually seemed happy. Lydia read the report 3 times, each reading stoking her fury higher. He'd replaced her with a farmer, a nobody with dirt under her fingernails and a degree that qualified her for nothing. Julian Reed, one of the most eligible bachelors in the country, was waking up before dawn to plant vegetables with a woman who probably shopped at thrift stores. It was insulting. It was infuriating. It was unacceptable. "I want everything on Clara Miles," she told the investigator. "Her history, her family, her weaknesses, everything I can use." Use for what exactly? To remind Julian who he is and who he isn't. Lydia's smile was cold and sharp. He's not a farmer. He's not some simple countryman playing in the dirt. He's Julian Reed, and he belongs with someone who understands that world. Someone like me. The investigator, who'd worked for enough wealthy clients to recognize obsession when he saw it, almost warned her off. Almost suggested that maybe she should let this go, move on, find someone else. But she was paying him very well, and his mortgage wasn't going to pay itself. "I'll have a full report by Friday," he said instead. Lydia smiled. Perfect. The report arrived as promised, and it was everything she'd hoped for. Clara Miles came from nothing. A working-class family in a dying factory town, a father who died leaving debts, a mother who cleaned houses to make ends meet. She'd gone to college on scholarships and loans, graduated with honors and crushing debt, then proceeded to fail at finding meaningful employment for 6 months. She was desperate. She was vulnerable. She was exactly the kind of person who'd cling to someone like Julian, seeing him as a meal ticket out of poverty. That was the story Lydia would tell. Not the truth. That Clara had helped a stranger without expecting anything in return. That she'd earned her opportunity through character rather than calculation. But a simpler story, one that people would believe because they wanted to believe it. Gold digger seduces vulnerable billionaire. Tale as old as time. She started slowly, planting seeds of doubt at the country club, over lunch with mutual friends, in the comment sections of society blogs. Just questions, really. Observations. "Have you heard Julian's seen someone new? A farmer, of all things. I hope someone's protecting his interests. You know how vulnerable he's been since his father's health scare." Elias hadn't had a health scare, but truth was flexible when you were building a narrative. The whispers spread the way whispers do in circles where everyone knows everyone and secrets are currency. Soon people Lydia barely knew were asking her about Julian's new girlfriend, this Clara person, whether she should be worried about Julian being taken advantage of. "I'm not worried," Lydia would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "I just think someone should make sure Julian understands what he's getting into. This woman, she came from nothing, 6 months unemployed, drowning in debt, and suddenly she's living on Reed property, working land that's worth millions. It's very convenient timing, don't you think?" The poison worked its way through Montgomery's social circles like infection, reaching people who'd never met Clara but already had opinions about her. Gold digger, opportunist, social climber using farming as an angle. It reached Julian's business partners, who started making pointed comments about protecting assets and prenuptial agreements. It reached the board members at Reed Industries, who wondered aloud whether Julian's judgment was compromised. It reached the society pages, where blind items appeared about eligible bachelors and the fortune hunters who pursued them. Julian ignored all of it. He'd lived in this world long enough to recognize Lydia's fingerprints on a smear campaign. He deleted the messages, avoided the events where people would ask leading questions, and focused on what mattered: the farm, the work, Clara. But Clara heard the whispers too. She had friends in Montgomery, people she'd met during her job search who suddenly stopped returning calls. She saw the blind items, recognized herself in the descriptions even though her name was never used. She felt the weight of being discussed, evaluated, found wanting by people who'd never met her. "They're saying I'm using you," she told Julian one evening as they finished work, "that I'm some kind of gold digger who seduced you for access to your money." Julian's jaw tightened. "Who's saying that? Everyone? Or at least everyone who matters in your world?" She sat on a hay bale, suddenly exhausted. "Your business partners think you need protection from me. Your social circle thinks I'm trash, and somewhere, Lydia Crow is laughing because her plan is working. It's not working. I don't care what they think. But you should care, Julian. These are your people, your world, and I'm the outsider making you look foolish. She met his eyes, her own bright with unshed tears. Maybe they're right. Maybe this was a mistake. You and me, this thing we're pretending isn't happening. Maybe it's just making everything worse. Don't. Julian knelt in front of her, his hands gripping her knees. Don't let Lydia win. Don't let their poison make you doubt what we've built here. What have we built? 30 acres of vegetables and a friendship we're both too scared to name? Clara's voice cracked. I'm falling for you, Julian. Have been for weeks. But I can't keep pretending that doesn't complicate everything. I can't keep pretending your world and my world will ever actually fit together. The confession hung between them, raw and terrifying. Julian's hands tightened on her knees, his face a war between fear and longing. I'm falling for you too, he said finally, the words torn from somewhere deep. I have been since that first morning when you handed me a shovel and told me to prove myself. Since you treated me like just another worker instead of Julian Reed, billionaire. Since you taught me what it feels like to care about something beyond quarterly earnings. Then what are we doing? Why are we fighting this? Because I'm terrified. Julian's voice broke. Because everyone I've ever trusted has either left me or betrayed me or died. Because I don't know how to be in love without losing myself. Because you deserve someone whole, Clara, and I'm still putting my pieces back together. Clara reached down, cupped his face in her dirt-stained hands. I don't need you whole. I just need you honest. I need you to stop protecting me from your feelings and let me decide what I can handle. What if I hurt you? Then you hurt me. And I survive, and we figure out whether this is worth fighting for. She leaned down until their foreheads touched. But Julian, I can't do this halfway. I can't keep being your friend while I'm dying to be more. Either we're in this together, complications and all, or we stop now before it destroys us both. Julian closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of her, earth and sweat, and something essentially Clara. He thought about his father's words, about courage and planting things before you were certain they'd grow. He thought about his mother, who'd loved fearlessly even knowing she'd die too young. He thought about the man he'd been 3 months ago, hollow, performing, slowly dying inside his perfect life. And then he stopped thinking and just acted. He kissed her, soft at first, tentative, like someone learning a new language. Then deeper, more certain, his hand sliding from her knees to her waist, pulling her down into his arms. Clara made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, her hands threading through his hair, her body melting into his like she'd been waiting for this forever. They broke apart, breathing hard, both of them trembling. Was that honest enough? Julian asked, his voice rough. It's a start. Clara smiled through her tears. But Julian, this doesn't solve anything. Your world still thinks I'm using you. Lydia still wants to destroy me. Your father still has expectations I might not meet. We still have to figure out how to exist together when everything's working against us. Then we'll figure it out together. No more pretending, no more careful distance. We're in this now, complications and all. He stood, pulling her to her feet, keeping her hands in his. And Clara? They can say whatever they want about you. They can whisper and judge and spread their poison. But I know who you are. I've worked beside you for 3 months. I've watched you bring dead land back to life through nothing but knowledge and determination and love. I've seen how you treat everyone, from my father to the seed supplier to the barn cats, with the same dignity and respect. So let them talk. Let Lydia spin her lies. It doesn't change the truth. Which is that you're the best person I know, that being with you makes me want to be better, that I'd rather have one honest conversation with you than 1,000 performances with people who only see my bank account. He pulled her close again, resting his chin on top of her head. And that I'm done being afraid of what this means. I love you, Clara Miles. However imperfectly, however incompletely. I love you. Clara buried her face in his chest, letting herself cry the tears she'd been holding back for weeks. I love you too. Even though you're infuriating and overcomplicated and come from a world that will probably never accept me, they'll accept you, they'll have to, because I'm not giving you up. Julian kissed the top of her head, and because my father will destroy anyone who hurts you. He's very protective of people he considers family. Is that what I am? Family? If you'll have us. Me and my eccentric father, and our terrible history of testing people. He pulled back to look at her. Clara, I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait, date properly, do this the conventional way, but I'm 42 years old and I've wasted enough time on conventional. So I'm asking now, before I lose my nerve. Will you take a chance on me? On us? Even knowing how messy and complicated it's going to be? Clara looked at him. This brilliant, broken man who'd shown up on her farm looking for something real and somehow found it in the dirt. She thought about all the reasons to say no, all the ways this could end badly, all the complications waiting to tear them apart. Then she thought about her father, who'd always said that anything worth having was worth fighting for. About her mother, who'd loved him despite poverty and struggle because some things mattered more than ease. About the land around them, which only grew because someone was willing to invest in something before knowing if it would succeed. Yes, she said, I'll take the chance. I'll take you, complications and all. They sealed it with another kiss, longer this time, deeper, full of promise and terror and hope. When they finally broke apart, the sun was setting, painting the fields in gold and crimson. Come home with me tonight, Julian said. Not to the penthouse, to my father's house. Let me introduce you properly as the woman I love instead of the farmer he's mentoring. Let's start being honest about this with everyone. Clara hesitated, suddenly aware of how she must look. Dirty, exhausted, dressed in work clothes that had seen better days. I'm not exactly presentable for meeting parents. You're perfect, and he already loves you, remember? He chose you first. Julian laced his fingers through hers. Besides, if we're doing this for real, you should probably know what you're signing up for. The Reed family is a lot to handle. More than one eccentric billionaire who dresses as a homeless person to test people's character? Much more. There's also a mansion, a suspicious house manager, and at least 3 different relatives who will show up demanding explanations about why I'm dating the help. I'm not the help. I'm a tenant farmer with a 1-year lease. Tell them that. I'm sure they'll find the distinction very comforting. Julian was grinning now, the weight of weeks of pretending finally lifted. So is that a yes? Will you come? Clara looked at the farm around them, her farm, at least for now. The land she was bringing back to life, the dream she was building from dirt and determination. This place was hers, but Julian was offering her something bigger than land, something scarier than any agricultural challenge. He was offering her his heart, his complicated, wounded, slowly healing heart. Yes, she said again. Let's go be honest. They drove to the Reed estate in Julian's car, Clara still in her work clothes because she'd refused to go home and change first. If Elias was going to see her as Julian's girlfriend, he was going to see her as she actually was, dirt under her fingernails, hay in her hair, smelling like honest work. Thomas opened the door with his usual professional courtesy, but Clara caught the slight smile that crossed his face when he saw them holding hands. Mr. Julian, Miss Miles, your father is in the library. Elias looked up when they entered, marked his page in the book he'd been reading, and simply waited. He'd clearly been expecting this. Dad, Julian said, his hand still firmly gripping Clara's. We need to talk to you about something. I should hope so. You've been in love with her for 6 weeks. I was beginning to think you'd never find the courage to admit it. Elias set his book aside, smiling at Clara with genuine warmth. Clara, dear, come sit. You look like you're about to face a firing squad instead of a delighted future father-in-law. Father-in-law? Clara's voice came out strangled. I think we're maybe a few steps away from that. Are we? Julian, are we? Elias raised an eyebrow at his son. Julian had the grace to look embarrassed. We're taking it one step at a time, Dad, but yes, Clara and I are together, officially, as of about an hour ago. Took you long enough. Elias stood, crossed to Clara, and pulled her into a hug that surprised her with its fierceness. Welcome to the family, dear girl. You've made my son happier than I've seen him in 20 years. For that alone, you have my eternal gratitude. Clara hugged him back, feeling tears prick her eyes again. I haven't done anything except be myself. Exactly, and that's precisely what he needed. Elias released her, his eyes bright. Now, I assume you're here because you finally stopped pretending and need advice on how to navigate the sharks who will try to tear you apart? Lydia's already started, Julian said. She's spreading stories about Clara being a gold digger. It's reached my business partners, the board, probably half of Montgomery by now. Let her spread her poison. It won't stick. Elias returned to his chair, his expression thoughtful. Lydia Crow is used to fighting battles where appearance matters more than truth. But this isn't that kind of battle. This is about character, and in that arena, Clara wins without even trying. Your social circle doesn't know that, Clara said quietly. They just see a nobody who came from nothing, suddenly living on your property, dating your son. The narrative writes itself. Then we change the narrative. Elias leaned forward, his mind clearly working. Julian, how's the spring merger going? Complicated. We're facing resistance from environmental groups who think we're not doing enough on sustainability. And Clara, how's the farm? Ahead of schedule. We'll have our first harvest in 8 weeks if everything goes according to plan. Perfect. Elias smiled like a man who'd just solved a particularly satisfying puzzle. Here's what we're going to do. Elias's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Reed Industries would launch a new sustainable agriculture initiative, with Clara's farm as the flagship project. They'd document the transformation from abandoned land to productive farm, showcase the environmental benefits, and position the company as genuinely committed to sustainable practices rather than just greenwashing for public relations. We make Clara the face of everything we're trying to achieve, Elias explained, his eyes gleaming with the strategic brilliance that had built an empire. Not as Julian's girlfriend, but as an agricultural expert who's demonstrating what's possible when you combine knowledge with genuine commitment. The relationship becomes secondary to her accomplishments. That could work, Julian said slowly, seeing the angles. The environmental groups have been demanding proof we're serious about sustainability. Clara's farm is exactly that proof. But this puts a target on my back even bigger than before, Clara protested. If I fail, I don't just let down your father, I damage your company's credibility. That's enormous pressure. You won't fail. You're 2 months ahead of schedule, and the soil quality reports are better than we projected. Elias pulled out a folder he'd apparently prepared in advance, because, of course, he had. I've been documenting everything. The irrigation restoration, the soil amendments, the sustainable practices you've implemented. It's a textbook case of agricultural resurrection. All we're doing is sharing that story publicly. Clara took the folder with shaking hands, flipping through photographs and data she hadn't realized Elias was collecting. The work was all there. Every improvement, every innovation, every small victory she'd won against the land's neglect. Seeing it compiled like this, she realized he was right. She wasn't just playing at farming. She was succeeding spectacularly. When? She asked. Next week. We'll hold a press conference at the farm, invite the environmental groups that have been criticizing us, show them what we're building. You'll present the data, explain the methodology, answer their questions. Elias smiled. And Julian will be there as CEO, not as your boyfriend. We keep the personal relationship private for now. Let your expertise speak for itself. And Lydia? Julian asked. She's not going to just accept this. Lydia Crow is a problem we'll handle separately. Something hard entered Elias's expression. She made a mistake when she started spreading lies about Clara. She forgot that I have resources too, and very little patience for people who hurt my family. The press conference was scheduled for the following Thursday. Clara spent the intervening days in a state of controlled panic, preparing her presentation while simultaneously trying to ensure the farm looked its absolute best. Julian helped where he could, but he was consumed with merger negotiations that had reached a critical phase. They stole moments together, early morning coffee before the day's chaos began, late evening phone calls when they were both too exhausted to do anything but talk. The relationship was so new, so fragile, and already they were being pulled in different directions by responsibilities that felt overwhelming. I miss you, Clara said Wednesday night, her voice small over the phone. Is that crazy? We've only been together a week and I already miss you. I miss you too. I miss the farm, the quiet, the feeling like I'm building something that matters. Julian sighed, the sound carrying all his exhaustion. This merger, it's important. It's going to secure thousands of jobs, but all I want is to be there with you, making sure you're ready for tomorrow. I'm ready. Your father's been coaching me. I know this material inside and out. I know you do, but I still want to be there. You will be? Tomorrow. As CEO, not as my boyfriend, but you'll be there. She paused, gathering courage. Julian, after this is over, after the press conference and the merger and all of it, what happens to us? Do we keep hiding? Do we go public? Do we figure out how to actually be together instead of just stealing moments? We figure it out. I promise. His voice was fierce with certainty. Clara, I meant what I said. I'm not giving you up. Whatever it takes, we'll find a way. Thursday arrived with perfect spring weather. Sunny, mild, the fields looking their absolute best. Clara dressed carefully in clean jeans and a simple blouse, professional but authentic. She wouldn't pretend to be something she wasn't, not even for Reed Industries. The press arrived promptly at 10. Reporters from agricultural journals, environmental organizations, even a few mainstream media outlets interested in the human interest angle. Julian stood near the back with his executive team, his face carefully neutral, every inch the CEO. Clara caught his eye once as she took her place at the podium they'd set up in front of the barn. He nodded slightly, a gesture of encouragement only she would recognize. Then she turned to her audience and began. 3 months ago, this land was dying. 15 years of neglect had degraded the soil, collapsed the irrigation infrastructure, and convinced everyone that restoration was impossible. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying across the assembled crowd. I'm here to tell you, they were wrong. She walked them through everything, the soil testing that revealed hidden potential, the sustainable amendments that brought nutrients back, the careful water management that revived the irrigation system. She showed them the first plantings already thriving, explained the crop rotation strategy that would maintain soil health long-term, detailed the biodiversity initiatives that would make the farm a model for environmental stewardship. The questions came fast and skeptical at first. How much had this cost? What made her qualified? Wasn't this just expensive greenwashing by a corporation trying to buy good publicity? Clara answered every question with data, with passion, with the absolute certainty of someone who knew her work was solid. She didn't mention Julian except as the CEO who'd approved the initiative. She didn't mention Elias except as the landowner who'd made it possible. She made the story about the land, about what was achievable when you combine knowledge with genuine commitment. By the end, the skepticism had shifted to something else: interest, respect, even excitement. The environmental groups asked about replicating the model elsewhere. The agricultural journals wanted to follow the farm through its first full season. The mainstream media wanted the human story behind the data. How did you end up here? One reporter asked. What's your connection to Reed Industries? Clara had prepared for this question, knew it was coming. But before she could answer, a voice cut through from the back of the crowd. She ended up here because she's a gold-digging opportunist who seduced her way into this position. Everyone turned. Lydia Crow stood at the edge of the gathering, perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, her smile sharp as broken glass. She'd brought her own photographer, Clara noticed. This was planned. Lydia. Julian's voice carried warning as he moved toward her. You need to leave. I need to tell the truth, something none of you seem interested in. Lydia addressed the crowd now, playing to her audience. Clara Miles was unemployed and desperate when she met Elias Reed. Within days, she'd manipulated her way onto this property. Within weeks, she'd seduced Julian. And now she's here, pretending this is about agriculture when it's really about access to the Reed fortune. The silence that followed was absolute. Camera flashes started going off. This was the story they'd actually wanted: scandal, romance, class warfare. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. This was it. The moment where everything she'd built would collapse under the weight of Lydia's poison. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but Elias was already moving to the podium, his expression calm but his eyes blazing. Miss Crow, I appreciate you making my job easier by showing up today. Saved me the trouble of finding you. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and his voice carried across the crowd. I'd like to introduce everyone to Marcus Chen, a private investigator I hired 2 weeks ago. Marcus, would you share what you found? A man in an unremarkable suit stepped forward from where he'd been standing quietly near the barn. Miss Crow hired me 6 weeks ago to investigate Clara Miles. When I delivered my report, she instructed me to help her fabricate evidence of financial misconduct, to manufacture a relationship timeline that suggested predatory behavior, and to plant stories in social media that would destroy Miss Miles's reputation. He held up a folder. I have recordings of every conversation, documented proof of her instructions, and a paper trail showing her payments. Lydia's face went white. That's a lie. He's lying. They paid him to... I paid him nothing. He came to me because he has a conscience, something you apparently lack. Elias's voice was steel wrapped in silk. You spread lies about a woman whose only crime was showing kindness to someone she thought was homeless. You tried to destroy her because she had something you wanted. And you did it all because you can't accept that character matters more than status. She took Julian from me. Lydia's composure shattered completely. We were perfect together. We had a future. Then your ridiculous test ruined everything. My test revealed who you really are. Julian made his own choice about what that meant. Elias stepped down from the podium, moving toward Lydia with the careful precision of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to issue a public apology to Clara Miles. You're going to retract every lie you've spread, and you're going to leave my family alone. And if I don't, then Marcus here will provide his evidence to every media outlet in this state. Your reputation, which you seem to value above all else, will be destroyed. Your family's business, which depends heavily on their banking relationship with Reed Industries, will find that relationship suddenly terminated. And I will personally ensure that everyone in Montgomery knows exactly what kind of person you are. Elias smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. I'm a patient man, Miss Crow, but you threaten my family. That I don't forgive. Lydia looked around wildly, seeing her photographer backing away, seeing the reporter's expressions shift from scandal-hungry to disgusted, seeing her perfect plan collapse in real time. This isn't over. It absolutely is. Julian had moved to stand beside his father, his CEO mask gone, replaced by cold fury. You humiliated a homeless man for entertainment. You lied about a woman you've never met. You hired someone to fabricate evidence and destroy a reputation. You did all of this because I chose someone with character over someone with cruelty. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something intimate and deadly. I'm glad you showed me who you are, Lydia. I'm glad my father's test worked. Because every day I spend with Clara, I realize how close I came to a lifetime with someone incapable of seeing human beings as anything but status symbols. She's nothing, Lydia's voice cracked. She's nobody from nowhere. She'll never fit in your world, Julian. She'll never be good enough. You're right, she'll never fit in a world where worth is measured by cruelty and status. Neither will I, anymore. He turned away from her, dismissing her as thoroughly as she'd dismissed his father on that rainy street. Security will escort you out. If you come near my family again, we'll pursue legal action for harassment and defamation. Security materialized. Thomas and two other men who'd been standing ready. Lydia allowed herself to be led away, but her parting shot carried across the crowd. You'll regret this, Julian. Both of you. When the novelty wears off and you realize you've thrown away everything for dirt and farm girl earnestness, you'll regret it. The crowd watched her go in stunned silence. Then the questions erupted, everyone shouting at once, cameras flashing, reporters surging forward. But Elias held up his hand, and somehow, miraculously, they quieted. Clara Miles earned her place here through kindness, knowledge, and hard work. My son fell in love with her because she's genuine in a world of performance. And this farm will succeed because she knows what she's doing. He looked at Clara, his expression softening. Any other questions about her qualifications or character can be directed to me. And I promise you I have 3 months of documentation proving she's exactly who she appears to be. Someone who grows things that matter. The press conference dissolved into chaos after that. Reporters clustering around Marcus to verify his evidence. Environmental groups approaching Clara to discuss partnerships. Julian's executive team trying to manage the narrative. But through it all, Clara felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for months. She'd been tested. Publicly, brutally, in front of everyone who mattered. And she'd passed, not because she'd performed or pretended, but because she'd simply been herself. Julian found her an hour later in the barn, where she'd retreated from the madness. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she shook with delayed reaction. "That was terrifying," she said into his chest. "That was you being magnificent. You didn't flinch, didn't let her poison touch you. Your father destroyed her, completely. It was brutal. It was necessary. She would have kept coming, kept hurting you, kept trying to tear us apart." Julian pulled back to look at her. "Clara, I need to tell you something. Before all this, before my father's evidence and Lydia's meltdown, I was ready to walk away from everything. The company, the money, the entire life I've built. Because none of it mattered if I couldn't be with you honestly. Julian, I'm not giving up the company. The merger's going through, we're doing good work, and I'm actually good at it. But I'm restructuring my life around what matters, which means the farm and you and finding a way to be the man my mother would be proud of." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you. Not carefully, not halfway. Completely. And I'm done hiding it." Before Clara could respond, he turned back toward the crowd still milling around outside. "Hey, can I get everyone's attention for a minute?" The crowd quieted, turning toward the barn. Julian kept one arm around Clara, holding her close despite her mortification. "Since we're all here, and since Lydia's already exposed the relationship I was trying to keep private for Clara's protection, I might as well make it official." He looked down at Clara, his smile nervous but determined. "Clara Miles is not my employee, my tenant, or some opportunist. She's the woman I love. She's smarter than anyone I've ever met, kinder than I deserve, and strong enough to call me on my garbage when I need it. We're together, publicly, officially, and permanently, if she'll have me." The cameras went crazy. Clara buried her face in Julian's shoulder, torn between mortification and joy. "You just told the entire world you love me." "I did. Is that okay? It's insane. It's going to be in every paper tomorrow. Your board is going to lose their minds." "Probably. Do you care?" Clara thought about it, really thought about the judgment that was coming, the scrutiny, the people who'd say she wasn't good enough or Julian was throwing his life away, about how much easier it would be to keep hiding, keep pretending this was just a professional relationship. Then she thought about her father, who'd worked himself to death to provide for his family because he believed some things were worth the sacrifice. About her mother, who'd loved him through poverty and struggle because joy mattered more than ease. About the land around her, which only grew because someone was willing to invest in something before knowing if it would succeed. "No," she said, lifting her face to kiss him in front of God and the media and everyone. "I don't care at all." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The press conference went viral. Not for the scandal Lydia had planned, but for the love story it revealed and the brutal takedown of a socialite's cruelty. Clara became an unlikely celebrity, her agricultural expertise suddenly in demand for consultations, speaking engagements, interviews. The environmental groups that had been criticizing Reed Industries became allies, working with Clara to develop sustainable agriculture programs that could be replicated nationwide. Julian's merger went through with surprising ease once the company's environmental credibility was established. The board grumbled about his relationship going public, but couldn't argue with the results. Stock prices up, public opinion improved, and genuine progress on sustainability initiatives. Lydia disappeared from Montgomery society, her reputation destroyed by the evidence of her conspiracy to fabricate defamation. The investigators' recordings were damning, her voice plotting Clara's destruction, her instructions to manufacture evidence, her casual cruelty about teaching the farm girl her place. Her family's business suffered as Reed Industries terminated their banking relationship and other companies followed suit, unwilling to be associated with someone exposed as malicious and dishonest. But Clara barely noticed Lydia's fall. She was too busy with the farm, which exploded into productivity as spring turned to summer. The first harvest exceeded all projections. Tomatoes so perfect they seemed designed rather than grown, lettuce that local restaurants fought over, strawberries that made people close their eyes in bliss. She hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload, both of them young agriculture graduates who reminded her of herself 6 months ago, brilliant, passionate, desperately seeking opportunity. Julian split his time between the farm and the city, learning to balance CEO responsibilities with the quieter work that fed his soul. He was better at it than Clara expected, bringing the same strategic brilliance he applied to business to agricultural planning. Together, they designed expansion plans that would turn the 30-acre farm into a model for sustainable agriculture, proving that environmental responsibility and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Elias watched it all with quiet satisfaction, his test having borne fruit beyond anything he'd imagined. He'd wanted to protect his son from cruelty and find someone genuine. He'd succeeded, and in the process, he'd found something for himself too. The farm reminded him of his father, of the values that had built the Reed fortune before it became about money instead of meaning. Working alongside Clara and Julian, he felt young again, purposeful, connected to something that mattered. "You know what makes me happiest?" he told Clara one evening as they finished work. "Not that you saved my son, though you did. Not that you're making this farm successful, though you are. But that you proved my test worked. That there are still people in the world who see human beings instead of status symbols." "Your test was cruel," Clara said, but she smiled as she said it. "You manipulated everyone." "I gave everyone a choice. Lydia chose cruelty. You chose kindness. The test just revealed what was already there." He squeezed her shoulder. "Thank you for choosing kindness. Thank you for seeing my son when he couldn't see himself. Thank you for loving this land the way it deserves to be loved. Thank you for giving me the chance, for seeing me when I was invisible." Clara's voice went thick with emotion. "You changed my life, Elias. You gave me everything I'd been working toward and never thought I'd achieve. You earned it. Every acre, every opportunity, every bit of success." He smiled. "Now let's talk about when you're going to marry my son and give me grandchildren to spoil." Clara laughed, choking on emotion. "We've been together 5 months, and you've loved him for 4 of those. Don't think I can't see it." Elias's expression went serious. "He's going to ask you soon. When he does, say yes. Don't make him wait. Don't make him wonder. That boy spent too much of his life uncertain about being loved. You're his certainty, Clara. Be brave enough to let him know he's yours too." 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning when the farm was quiet and the fields were heavy with summer abundance, Julian took Clara to the eastern section of the property where his grandfather's original farmhouse still stood. It was smaller than the barn, weathered by decades of neglect, but structurally sound. "I've been thinking," Julian said, his hand wrapped around Clara's as they stood in front of the house. "This place, it's where my grandfather raised my father, where they learned what mattered. I want to restore it." "That's a beautiful idea. It could be housing for the farm managers or a teaching space for—" "I want to restore it for us." Julian turned to face her fully. "Clara, I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait. Do this the conventional way. But conventional hasn't worked for me. Conventional gave me 8 months with someone who laughed at suffering. Unconventional gave me you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Clara's breath caught. "I'm not good at this. I'm going to mess up, say the wrong thing, make mistakes. But I love you more than I've ever loved anyone or anything. You make me want to be better. You make me brave enough to choose meaning over performance. And I can't imagine building a future that doesn't have you at the center of it." He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the morning light. "Marry me, Clara. Help me restore this house, this farm, this life my family forgot how to live. Build something real with me." Clara looked at the ring, at Julian's nervous face, at the farmhouse waiting to be loved again. She thought about all the reasons to be cautious. They'd only been together 5 months. His world and hers were still finding ways to fit together. There would be challenges and complications and moments of doubt. Then she thought about her father telling her that love was simple. You either chose each other every day or you didn't. About her mother saying that perfect timing was a myth, and you had to be brave enough to jump when it mattered. About the land around them, which only flourished because someone had been willing to invest before knowing the outcome. "Yes," she said, the word coming out half laugh, half sob. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll build with you. I'll choose you every day for as long as we both live." Julian slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and morning dew and the future they were brave enough to claim. When they broke apart, both of them were crying, both of them laughing, both of them whole in a way neither had been before. They were married 3 months later in a ceremony that deliberately mixed both their worlds. The wedding took place on the farm, between the rows of crops Clara had brought back from death. Elias walked Clara down an aisle made of hay bales, tears streaming down his face as he placed her hand in his son's. Her mother and sister sat in the front row, both of them crying, both of them wearing dresses Clara had bought them, both of them radiant with joy that their girl had found this improbable happiness. Julian's business associates attended because they had to, but the people who mattered most were the ones Clara had chosen, the farm assistants she'd hired, the agricultural students she'd started mentoring, the environmental advocates who'd become allies, the seed suppliers and equipment vendors who'd supported her from the start. This wasn't a society wedding designed for magazine spreads. This was a celebration of two people who'd found each other in mud and truth. The vows they wrote themselves were simple. Julian promised to keep showing up, keep working, keep choosing real over easy. Clara promised to keep calling him on his nonsense, keep teaching him what mattered, keep loving him through the mess of being human. They promised to build together, to fail together, to grow things that mattered, whether those things were crops or children or a life that honored the people who'd come before them. When the officiant pronounced them married, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests shook leaves from the trees. And when Julian kissed his bride, he tasted salt from her tears and sweetness from her joy and the future they were planting together in soil that had once been dead but was now abundantly, impossibly alive. The reception lasted until midnight, music and laughter echoing across fields that had been silent too long. Elias danced with Clara, with her mother, with her sister, his face bright with contentment. He'd set out to test whether kindness still existed, whether his son could find someone real. He'd succeeded beyond his wildest hopes. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Elias pulled the newlyweds aside. "I have a wedding gift for you. The farm. All 30 acres, the equipment, the house. I'm deeding it to you both, permanently. No lease, no conditions. It's yours." Clara gasped. "Elias, we can't accept—" "You absolutely can. You've earned it 10 times over. You brought this land back to life. You brought my son back to life. You proved that the values my father taught me still matter." His voice went thick with emotion. "This farm should belong to people who love it the way you do, who'll raise children here, teach them what matters, pass on the knowledge that growing things, whether crops or companies or human kindness, is the work that counts." Julian embraced his father, both of them crying now. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for the test, for Clara, for remembering what matters. Thank your mother. She's the one who taught me that character reveals itself in how we treat people who can't fight back. I just borrowed her wisdom." Elias released his son, smiling through his tears. "Now go. Dance with your wife, build your future, and for the love of everything holy, give me grandchildren before I'm too old to chase them through these fields." Clara and Julian danced alone as the last guest departed, the stars wheeling overhead, the land quiet and abundant around them. They didn't talk about the future they'd build or the children they'd raise or the legacy they'd create. They just held each other, two broken people who'd found healing in dirt and honesty and the courage to choose real over easy. Miles away, in a small apartment she'd been forced to rent after her family disowned her, Lydia Crow scrolled through wedding photos on social media and felt the final death of her pride. She'd lost everything, her reputation, her family's support, the future she'd almost secured. And for what? For cruelty. For thinking status mattered more than character. For failing a test she hadn't known she was taking until it was too late to pass. She closed her phone and stared at the ceiling, wondering if redemption was possible for someone like her. Wondering if she could learn what that farm girl understood instinctively, that kindness wasn't weakness, that seeing people mattered more than using them, that the only test that mattered was the one you gave yourself every day in small choices no one else witnessed. It would take years for her to understand what she'd lost, longer still to become someone capable of earning it back. But in that moment, staring at photos of Julian and Clara's joy, she took the first small step toward change. She deleted the social media apps where she'd spread her poison. She called the investigator she'd hired and apologized for trying to make him complicit in destruction. She looked at herself honestly for the first time in her life and saw what Elias Reed had seen on that rainy street, someone who measured worth in all the wrong ways. Back at the farm, as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, Clara woke in her husband's arms in the restored farmhouse that was now their home. Through the window, she could see the fields they'd planted together, the crops growing strong and healthy, the land responding to love the way it was always meant to. Julian stirred beside her, his hand finding hers instinctively. "Good morning, Mrs. Reed." "Good morning, Mr. Miles Reed." They'd hyphenated, refusing to let either name disappear. "Ready to feed the chickens?" "In a minute. First," he pulled her closer, his voice still rough with sleep. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for teaching me what my mother tried to teach me before she died, that the only wealth that matters is what you grow with your own hands and share with people you love." Clara kissed him, soft and sweet, then pulled him out of bed. "Come on, those chickens don't care about philosophy. They just want breakfast." They dressed in work clothes and went out into the morning together, hand in hand, ready to do the work that mattered. Above them, the sky brightened. Around them, the land breathed. Ahead of them, a future grew, one planted in truth, watered with kindness, and harvested with the certain knowledge that they'd passed the only test that ever really counted. The test of being human. The test of choosing love over cruelty. The test of seeing people, in all circumstances, as worthy of dignity and care. And in passing that test, they'd found something more valuable than any fortune, more lasting than any empire, more precious than gold or status or the world's approval. They'd found each other. They'd found themselves. They'd found the truth that Elias had always known and Julian's mother had lived, that kindness given freely, without calculation or expectation, was the only investment that never failed to grow. The farm flourished. The love endured. And the beggar's test, that simple moment of choice on a rainy street, rippled outward into a future none of them could have predicted, but all of them had earned through the simple, profound act of seeing people as they truly were, human, valuable, worthy of kindness. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.